Political advertising in the UK has been a largely regulated space. That is, up until about a decade ago.
Get Brexit done.
Destruction, failure, and just plain old incompetence.
Historically, political advertising has been banned from broadcast, aside from a small allotted period of time in the run-up to an election. However, as the times are changing and technology and advertising formats have evolved, political parties have found and embraced some legal loopholes. Our screens are now awash with political adverts, character attacks, and sometimes factually inaccurate messaging, created and paid for by our government and the opposition parties. So what does it mean now that our leaders are playing dirty? What can we expect to see in the lead-up to a general election? And will this have any effect on voters? Or is it all just Westminster name-calling? I'm joined today by journalist, author and, most importantly, New Statesman columnist, Jonn Elledge. In the studio. Jonn, welcome to our studio.
Hello. It's all very fancy down here these days. I don't know what you people have been doing, but it's got all nice.
We've redecorated since you were last here. We've been thinking a lot about political ads as we head into this election, and we thought it'd be a good chance to look back on some of the great political ads of the past couple of decades, what the parties are doing now, and what we can expect. So,
I mean, it's going to get worse. It's going to get so much worse.
Well, actually, that's a good starting point. Things can only get better, because I went and rewatched today, or possibly watched for the first time. I'm not sure I've ever seen it before, but the 1997 Things Can Only Get Better Labour ad.
So this is me genuinely finding out the piece of information that this was an ad, not just a campaign song. I love it as a campaign song. It may be in my current playlist. I cannot confirm or deny reports that on Saturday night I was in a pub and some Labour councillors recognised me and literally started singing it at me.
Has it become like a form of hello? That's what
apparently
you
it
do
has.
now?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, there was a certain unnamed GB News host who I saw bopping along to it at Labour conference last year. It's very much coming back. But I didn't know that there was a campaign ad to go with it till just now.
So for people who haven't seen it and don't remember it from 1997, it's basically just the song and a group of people going to vote and on their way to the polling station, feeling very happy and optimistic that they get to put that cross in the Labour box. And it's got a real feeling of hope, and it's a really positive advert.
So it has very little to teach us this year.
There are some negative ones from political ads past that are kind of quite memorable. Any in particular that stick in your mind? So
the classic that stays in my mind is I know it's for the wrong side, but the 1979 Tory one, Labour Isn't Working. With just the queue of people, which later came to seem bitterly ironic because obviously unemployment went up from 1 million to 3 million within a couple of years of the Tories being in power. But it was a very powerful image, a powerful slogan, and people still riff on it 45 years later for that reason. More recently, oh God, it's another Tory one, but Alex Salmond with the tiny M Miliband in his pocket in 2015.
That was powerful.
It was powerful. I mean, I don't think it was the only reason things swung against Miliband and Labour in that election, but it was clearly a factor. And the Tories know this, which is why they're going around talking about how we're going to have a hung parliament and coalition of chaos now, even though that's not what the polls show, is it? That's a lie.
That advert, that image of Alex Salmond with Ed Miliband in his pocket, that's kind of become a meme in itself. I think you're going to get Conservatives trying it again with John Swinney, the new First Minister in Scotland, and with Keir Starmer in his pocket. I think there was also a Labour reversal one where they put Rishi Sunak in Liz Truss's pocket. Yeah,
I don't think that's the only attempted reversal either, but none of them have kind of stuck like the original.
Yeah.
None of them have kind of resonated. And I'm not sure if that's, we have just listed a couple of Tory ones. I wonder if they find it easier for these things to resonate because of there's a lot of papers out there that are broadly well disposed towards the Tory party and far fewer well disposed towards the Labour Party. I wonder if that's a factor or if they can just pay better ad men.
Well, certainly the Labour Isn't Working one was a Saatchi
That
ad.
was Saatchi, I believe, yeah. Actually, a favourite, which I don't think was ever used, but I remember reading reports about it at the time, maybe even seeing the image. So the 2007 election, which you'll remember is never happening.
Yeah.
The one Gordon Brown was kind of gearing up for and then
bottled it one, yeah.
There was another one, I believe, was a Saatchi ad, which was going to be just a picture of him. It's not Flash, just Gordon.
Yeah.
Against David Cameron, which I think could have been quite effective, actually. But he didn't call that election, so we'll never know.
We'll never know. But you've been thinking about this in the context of British political ads compared to American ones, and they do everything a bit bigger and a bit more aggressively. Do you think that's fair?
So,
or they have been?
It absolutely is fair. So a bit of context for this. There is a piece of legislation called something like the 1954 Television Act, which put quite severe limits on the political advertising you could run on terrestrial TV, and then later I think that was expanded to satellite. But obviously what it doesn't cover, because it didn't exist in 1954, is streaming platforms or the internet. And now a lot of people are going to be seeing video ads when they're loading a YouTube video or just when they're scrolling what we used to call Twitter. And increasingly, the streamers are apparently sort of looking at expanding their advertising because their business model isn't great.
Amazon and Netflix now have ads.
Yeah, because they weren't actually making that much money from, they were spending a lot of money on prestige TV and not really making that much in return. There were reports a couple of weeks ago that ITVX, which is ITV's streaming platform, is considering possibly taking political ads because they're excluded from this legislation. So it is possible we're going to start seeing more, and I think also more unhinged political ads of the sort that you do get in the United States.
So let's go back a bit to the sort that you do get in the United States. You had a favourite one that inspired a Simpsons episode. I
mean, I wouldn't say it was my favourite ad. It's a favourite joke in The Simpsons. But if you've ever seen the episode... Are you
saying you don't have a favourite political ad, Connor? You must do.
I don't know if I mean, it probably is Labour Isn't Working, just because it's the one that's stuck in my brain, even though I hate what it did. But no, it wouldn't be this one because it was horrific. It is a favourite joke in The Simpsons. So if you've ever seen the episode where Sideshow Bob runs for mayor... there is a joke about revolving door prisons, which literally show prisoners going in and out of revolving doors or on these massive escalators over a prison wall, which was based on a real ad run in, I think, the 1988 presidential campaign against the Democrat Michael Dukakis to undermine him.
Michael Dukakis vetoed mandatory sentences for drug dealers. He vetoed the death penalty. His revolving door prison policy gave weekend furloughs to first-degree murderers not eligible for parole. While out, many committed other crimes like kidnapping and rape, and many are still at large.
That, in turn, was a follow-up to an ad against a guy called Willie Horton, who had been released on the US equivalent of bail or parole or something. But under Dukakis' governorship of Massachusetts, this guy had been released and had gone on to commit violent crime. And the Republicans made great hay out of this. They basically scared a lot of sort of middle-class white voters into voting for the Republican Party by suggesting that Dukakis was soft on crime. And so they're not nice ads. Like, there's a lot of dog whistles going on there, but they were very effective in terms of kind of the political effect they were intended to have. And they gave us a great bit in The Simpsons. So
great bit in The Simpsons aside, because I don't really see Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer appearing on The Simpsons anytime soon. Although I don't watch The Simpsons anymore, so it could happen.
Nobody has this century.
No.
Yeah.
So it could happen. But I did see the Conservatives... I want to call it a pro-Susan Hall ad, but I think it was more an anti-Sadiq Khan ad.
It was an anti-London ad. It was weird.
But they ran it in... the run-up to the mayoral elections. Obviously, Sadiq Khan won a third term. Susan Hall's campaign seemed to mostly be based on criticising his record on crime. Crime was a big thing for her, although, as you say, that sort of had this strange anti-Londoners message.
Well, the ad, just in case anyone hasn't seen it,
Describe the ad,
extremely weird. So first, it was all black and white. It had a growly American accented voiceover. It was like the trailer for a Batman film. It was like, in a city where like roaming gangs of ULEZ enforcers have motorists cowering in terror. It was all that kind of stuff.
London, a city steeped in history. But tonight, its ancient streets bear witness to a different tale, a tale not of kings and queens, but of crime and desperation. It is a city now run by the Labour Party. Its police answer to them. It is a blueprint for how Labour intend to run the rest of the country, if you let them. In the depths of these narrow passageways tread squads of ULEZ enforcers dressed in black, faces covered with masks, terrorizing communities at the beck and call of their Labour mayor master.
The Tories took the first version of it down because they had footage of what looked like a riot, which turned out not to be on London transport. It was in New York Penn Station. So they had to take that out. But then they put it back up.
But didn't the second version have footage of Birmingham or another city?
No, that was a different ad, I think.
That was a different ad, okay.
Yeah. But
getting my Tory online gaffes mixed up.
I mean, there was you can tell they mean this because they did follow it up with a very similar ad about what Labour's council in Birmingham had done. Birmingham Council is the largest in Europe, and it's the largest. Has it gone bankrupt, or is it just on the verge?
It's effectively gone bankrupt.
Yeah, and they're basically trying to say this is what happens when you let Labour run cities. It's not really been very effective, but I think we're going to see more stuff like that because once upon a time, making these ads was quite expensive. Like you had to spend a lot of money on kind of like, scripting them and then filming them and then, distributing them. Whereas now you can basically film them on a phone and edit them in like 20 minutes and then bung them out and you see what sticks. So I think we're going to see a lot more terrible ads like this.
But one of the things that you do need is to pay for advertising space. And one of the things that has changed since the last election is the government has nearly doubled the amount that the parties can spend during a general election campaign from 19.5 million to 35 million. So that's going to give Labour and the Conservatives an advantage, both in terms of, they could make the ads very cheaply, but in terms of where they want to target them and where we end up seeing them.
Yeah, Facebook's going to be hell, isn't it? No one's going to enjoy this. So that increase, I think it sounds a lot dodgier than it actually is. As I understand it, this is largely an inflationary increase because the figures haven't been updated in some time. But it is nonetheless a quantity of money that really only the two biggest parties are going to hope to have access to. So we're going to be seeing a lot of ads from those guys. One of my favourite facts around the kind of potentially quite boring regulation of this stuff is the last time the rules on political advertising were updated was the Communications Act 2003, which came into effect 7 months before the creation of Facebook. So this is quite how out of date the rules are. I suspect that the run up to this election is just going to be, there's going to be more of these Tory ads, like basically warning that a Labour government will steal your grandmother. And there's going to be a lot of, I think actually Labour is on a bit of a roll with this stuff. They did a great one a few weeks ago, which was just like footage of Liz Truss saying she thought she had unfinished business. And then repeating it several times. I mean, if that doesn't have people voting Labour, I don't know what will.
Well, it wasn't just her saying that she had unfinished business. And it was sort of a horror film-esque sound effects and visuals, but then trying to connect what she had been saying to Rishi Sunak and unfunded tax cuts. So sort of trying to make Rishi Sunak the horror film-esque successor to the Liz Truss monster, I think was the general theme.
I definitely have unfinished business.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder. We've talked about a lot of ads that clearly had an impact, but there's also a lot that don't, that nobody remembers because they did absolutely nothing, or even that can backfire. Like another very influential political ad was the one the Canadian Conservatives ran in 1993, which fans of Conservative wipeouts will recall as the one where they won only 3 seats and the Prime Minister lost her seat. But the party then ran an ad over footage of the Liberal Party's leader, Jean Chrétien. They ran an ad over a footage of his face with just people saying, "Is this the Prime Minister?" And it backfired because his face was partially paralysed. And it looked like they were mocking someone for his disability.
Jean Chrétien, a Prime Minister? Think twice.
And there was a great quote from Chrétien where he just basically said, like, I can only speak out of one side of my mouth. I'm not a Tory. I don't speak out of both sides of my mouth. And, there are a lot of reasons that the Canadian Tories lost that election. But that ad really backfired on them. I also wonder whether, like, the Tories are going to spend a fortune on ads. Like, is there a market for their message at this point in history?
Well, it's not just the Conservatives who can sometimes run controversial ads that may or may not backfire. What did you make of the ad that had, I'm going to try and describe this, people who haven't seen it, but a picture of Rishi Sunak, and the text reads, "Do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't." And this is a reference to the crime backlogs and the court backlogs under the Conservatives and the cuts to funding for the Ministry of Justice. But it was quite a deliberate personal attack on something that is not Rishi Sunak's fault as an individual and was sort of made out to look that way. And it did get a lot of people, including people on the Labour side, quite upset.
So, yeah, I go back and forth on this stuff because on the one hand, you're quite right. This is an unreasonable personal attack. Rishi Sunak has many flaws as a human being and a politician, I'm sure. But I don't think he actually believes that adults convicted of sexually assaulting children shouldn't go to prison. That is not a thing Rishi Sunak thinks, is it? That's not a belief he holds. And this is like, there's an element of gutter politics here. And it's like, you know, you can say, well, Labour should rise above and be the better party and all that. And a lot of people on the left are very uncomfortable with this stuff. On the other hand, though, this is exactly the kind of shit the Tories pull. And there's much less pearl clutching when they do. I mean, like, just think of the nonsense they got. I mean, the stuff about Sadiq Khan we were talking about a few minutes ago. Like, Sadiq Khan does not think that gang crime is okay. Sadiq Khan is not sort of gleefully ruling over an increasingly lawless London. That's not true. And I do think sometimes, like, I think there's an argument that Labour shouldn't do this, but I can also see the argument that, like, well, the Tories are going to. So why should we expect Labour to be better? One
of the lines that sort of came out of that was, now that Labour have done this and have run this ad that is quite unfair, the Conservatives will feel like, the gloves are off and they're allowed to do it now. I get the impression that they would have run those ads anyway. They weren't waiting for Labour to do it first.
I don't think there is any universe in which they restrain themselves. I mean, seriously, like, I think Sadiq Khan is probably beatable as mayor. Like, his record in terms of policy and delivery has not been amazing.
We have written about this a lot in the New Statesman magazine.
I've really gone on to a frankly tedious length. But I do kind of feel like, he should have been beatable, but the Tories seem completely incapable of running against him on his record. And every time they just try and portray him as some kind of deranged monster. And he obviously isn't. And it just means a lot of Londoners kind of end up voting for him. It seems to backfire because, like, I mean, you do sort of wonder what's really going on there, that they can't accept that he's the liberal, moderate Muslim politician he seems to be. Who knows what that's about?
Do you think it's sort of akin to the going back to posters and going back to Blairism, the poster of Tony Blair with the demon eyes?
Oh, yeah, New Labour, New Danger.
Yeah, which didn't really resonate because nobody thought that Tony Blair actually was dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think, after he'd been in office for a few years, I think then that might have resonated a bit better. But I think what's often forgotten with that one is it wasn't their first, they were scrambling for an attack line. Like, prior to that, for a while, they tried to portray him as Bambi.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they called it, like, they tried calling him weak, and I think that came first, before New Labour, New Danger. So I think a lot of the time these ads are literally just kind of like throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. We're probably going to see a lot of that over the next few months, because I don't feel Keir Starmer's actually really been defined in the public mind.
I mean, you could run an advert about him being boring.
You could, but how do you make an advert about someone being boring interesting? Also, isn't there a danger after the last 14 years that a lot of the electorate are just going to be like, yes, please make politics boring?
Like that curse, may you live in interesting times.
Yes.
So these kind of political ads, they generate a buzz. Journalists love writing about them and talking about them. But do they actually work? Do they resonate with people who are not obsessed with politics?
Well, sometimes they clearly do. And, a lot of the ones we've talked about, the ones that sort of stay in our memory are the ones that work. And I think, if they're crystallising a feeling that people already have, then that's going to stick. Like, it's not like in 2015 people were convinced that Ed Miliband was some kind of strongman politician until the Tories ran that ad. That ad kind of like solidified a feeling that was already there. And I think the same was probably true in the run-up to the 1979 election, when there had been a lot of economic chaos. People were feeling hit to their pockets. Unemployment was going up. So that ad kind of sticks in people's minds. I do think there are also a lot of political ads that we've just completely forgotten about because they didn't work. And I think the vast majority probably don't. And a vast amount of money is going to be spent on ads that are going to do absolutely nothing. Like, I do genuinely wonder if, like, the Tories have just kind of passed the point of no return at this point, where, like, it does just feel like people want to change. It's not enthusiasm for Labour. It is literally people want the Tories out.